The sun was beginning to set over the crowded streets of Cebu. Narrow alleys twisted like a maze between crumbling buildings. The air smelled of fried street food and dust from the unpaved roads. A boy walked barefoot along the uneven pavement. His clothes were worn and tattered, patched at the elbows and knees. An old guitar hung from his shoulder, its strings frayed and some missing. The boy paused in front of a small wooden stall where vendors were packing their goods for the day. He looked around at the laughing children playing with broken toys in the puddles. Some of them threw empty cans at him as a joke. He smiled faintly, not letting their mockery stop him. He whispered softly to himself as he pulled a worn photograph from his pocket. It was a picture of his father who had passed away years ago. His eyes glistened in the golden sunlight. "This one's for you, Dad," he murmured and gripped his guitar a little tighter. He climbed the narrow stairs to the rooftop of his home. The boards creaked under his weight. He sat down cross-legged and strummed the guitar. The strings groaned under his fingers. He closed his eyes and began to sing. His voice was rough, unpolished, but it carried an honesty that no instrument could match. The neighbors leaned out of their windows and shook their heads or laughed. "You can't even sing properly," they shouted, but the boy did not falter. His fingers moved across the strings with a determination that refused to break. He sang every note with the weight of his life behind it. Every chord carried the story of hunger, struggle, and dreams that refused to die. The sky above turned orange and purple as the last rays of sunlight fell on his face. He finished the song with a trembling voice, opened his eyes, and looked out over the city. He imagined a stage with bright lights, thousands of people watching, and judges listening to his story through every note. He imagined applause, cheers, and the golden light of recognition. Months later the boy arrived in Ireland. The streets were different here. The air smelled of rain and cold stone buildings. Everything was foreign and grand. The boy held his guitar tighter as he approached the massive building of Ireland's Got Talent. The stage was enormous, with glittering lights and a crowd that filled the seats like a sea of faces. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all the people who had laughed at him back home, all the moments he had wanted to give up. He reminded himself of the photo in his pocket. His father would be proud. He stepped inside and the bright lights hit him immediately. Backstage, he saw the other contestants. Some were singing in perfect voices, some performing incredible tricks, but he held himself tall despite his worn clothes and shoes with holes. He closed his eyes and imagined his music reaching every heart in the room. When his turn came, the announcer called his name. The crowd murmured as he walked onto the stage. His hands shook slightly as he held his guitar. The lights were blinding, and he could hear whispers. "Who is this kid?" they murmured. A few chuckles came from the audience. He swallowed hard and took a deep breath. Then he strummed the first chords of Hotel California. The sound was shaky at first, but then his voice filled the auditorium. It was raw and filled with emotion. The judges looked skeptical at first. One frowned and pressed a button to signal doubt. Another leaned forward, curious but unsure. Slowly, the tone of the song started to change the room. The emotion in the boy's voice told a story of struggle, loss, and hope that no one could ignore. As the song progressed, the boy's voice grew stronger. Each note carried the weight of his life. His hands moved over the guitar with skill and passion. The audience fell silent. They could feel the pain and determination radiating from him. Cheers started forming in some eyes. One judge pressed a hand against his chest, trying to steady himself. Another wiped a tear from her cheek, unable to hold back the emotions the music had stirred. The boy sang with everything he had. He poured his heart into every note. The story of a poor boy from Cebu, who had been laughed at and mocked, was now being told to the world in the most beautiful way possible. The chorus hit and his voice cracked slightly with emotion. He did not hide it. He let it happen because it was real. He let the music speak louder than his fears. When the final note faded, there was a moment of silence. The boy stood there, trembling slightly, eyes closed, waiting. The audience erupted into applause, but more importantly, the judges were stunned. One judge gasped and wiped tears from his face. Another had their hand hovering over the golden buzzer, their eyes shining with emotion. The boy's chest heaved as he tried to calm himself. He looked out at the audience, noticing their cheers and applause. The energy in the room was electric. It was a moment that could not be forgotten. Then one judge, unable to contain their emotions, slammed the golden buzzer. The sound of the buzzer echoed like thunder. Golden light flooded the stage, illuminating the boy and his guitar. He dropped to his knees, crying tears of joy. The audience rose to their feet, cheering louder than he had ever heard in his life. The other judges stood and clapped, some still wiping their eyes. The boy clutched his guitar to his chest and whispered softly, "I did it, Dad, I did it." The host came running onto the stage to congratulate him. The boy tried to stand, but his knees were weak. He laughed and cried at the same time. The judges came forward, hugging him, praising him for his bravery and talent. The crowd continued to cheer, their claps echoing through the auditorium. The camera captured every moment, every tear, every smile. The boy from the streets of Cebu, who had been laughed at, who had faced ridicule and hardship, was now being celebrated for his talent. He looked around at the audience, at the judges, and then at his worn shoes. Everything that had seemed like a limitation had become a story of triumph. Backstage after the performance, the boy sat quietly holding his guitar. The judges came to him one by one, telling him how extraordinary he was. One said it was the most emotional performance they had ever seen. Another told him that his voice had touched their hearts in a way that words could not explain. The boy smiled shyly, tears still running down his face. He thought about the streets of Cebu, the rooftops, the empty cans thrown at him, the laughter that had once hurt him. All of it had led to this moment. All of it had been part of the journey that brought him here. The host returned to the stage and announced to the audience that the boy had earned a place in the next round. The crowd erupted again. People were crying, smiling, and clapping. Some were standing on their chairs, cheering. The boy felt a warmth in his chest. He had dreamed of this for so long. He had imagined it, but nothing compared to the reality of it. The judges gave him one last round of applause and waved to the crowd. The camera zoomed in on the boy's face. His eyes were full of tears, his lips trembling, but his smile shone brighter than any stage light. As the show went on, clips of his performance were replayed on the big screen. Every note, every emotion, every tear was captured. People in the audience were still wiping their eyes. Social media would explode in hours with videos of his performance. The boy, a poor child from Cebu, had taken the world by storm with nothing but a worn guitar and a voice full of emotion. His story was not just about music. It was about courage, hope, and the power of dreams. The boy walked off the stage holding his guitar. The golden light of the buzzer still shone behind him. The crowd continued to cheer. Judges spoke to each other in whispers, amazed that such talent could come from someone so young and from such humble beginnings. The boy knew his journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more stages, and more people to impress. But in that moment, he allowed himself to feel pure joy. He allowed himself to cry, laugh, and celebrate the victory that was his own. He thought about his father again and whispered, "Thank you for giving me the strength." He stepped outside the auditorium, the night air cool on his face. The streets of Ireland seemed less intimidating now. The lights of the city shone like stars, and he felt a spark of possibility he had never known before. The boy held his guitar close, thinking about the long journey from the alleys of Cebu to this stage, from being laughed at to being celebrated. Every struggle, every hardship, every small moment of doubt had brought him here. He smiled through his tears. His story was far from over, but for the first time, he felt like the world was finally listening.